Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be a tag video. So I am going to do a series of unfortunate events book tag, and I was tagged in this by the lovely Jasmine over at Jasmine's Reads. Now we're really good friends on BookTube. I class her as a really good friend of mine. She's lovely, I love her videos, we have very similar tastes in books. She's just a fantastic person, her content is always so smooth, so polished. She has beautiful command of language in how she describes books, which I envy. I just love everything she has to say about books, and if she says that a book is amazing, 9 times out of 10 I will go ahead and start researching that book and putting it to wish list because I really respect her taste in books. I also really respect her and her channel. So hi Jasmine, if you're watching, just wanted to give a big shout out to you. I love you and your channel. So I'm going to link her channel down below and her version of the tag if you would like to go and check her out. I'm sure most of you watching this video will have heard me mention her before and probably aware of her, but if you're not, go and check her out. So I'm going to do the tag. I'm going to put my little sheet of paper down here, so if I keep looking down, that's just so I can remember what I was going to say, because these questions are quite difficult for me and I did have to actually take 5 or 10 minutes to think and plot down my answers before I start this video. But enough of that boring stuff, let's just get straight on with this book tag. So question number 1. A book you would consider a fortunate slow burn. Now for this one, I'm picking Days Without End by Sebastian Barry, which I've recently just finished. Now that book was a deliciously slow burn for me, and that's how I would describe it. When you first read it, it doesn't kind of move your world, it doesn't shake things up in a dramatic way, but it's one of those books that as you get deeper into it, you appreciate the dialogue, the style of writing, and how the plot is slowly driven forward. For example, it's a war story, but it's not flooded with this happens and then this happens and this is what's going on. It's very much wars in the background, but their relationship between Thomas McNulty and John Cole, their homosexual relationship, is also in the background. There's a subtlety about it, things aren't thrown at you, and that's what I like, that it wasn't one that had to be action-packed, and especially being a war novel, a lot of books race to make it all about the action, and I didn't feel that intensity, but I love that about the book. That's what I think is phenomenal about the book. So I think it is a great slow burn read. Number 2, a book with an unfortunate death. Now, if anybody watches this channel and know me to any degree by now, you know I'm gonna say it's Beth's death in Little Women, because it's just tragic. I mean, the first time you read that, whether you're 12, 14, 21, it's just heartbreaking because you get so invested in that family dynamic and in those characters that to lose someone who was so highly regarded and loved by the entire family, and how devastating it is as a result for the entire family, will always hit you in the feel zone, will always make you choke up and feel a bit sad. You know, it's like when parents die in Disney. It's always tragic, it's always sad, and it always stays with you. So I'm going to pick that one. And then question number 3, a book with an unfortunate setting you would not want to live in. Now I'm going to pick for this The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, because when I read that, the feeling I got from reading that was a claustrophobia, a kind of feeling sick, a nauseous feeling of fear about that world. The way that she created that world makes you feel uncomfortable, not just because I'm a woman and obviously the world is not designed very well for women, but the fact that people can't feel how they want to, they can't express how they want to. When there's these really piercing and kind of dramatic flashbacks to her life before and how it's got to this state, and the decline is also really unnerving. It's a world where women don't have respect for other women, men certainly don't have respect for women, and when you see the wives have to be present at the birthing with the handmaids, it's just a horrible, horrible world. Medieval elements in it, it's got barbaric, visceral elements to it, it's just very haunting and disturbing. And then number 4, a book that was unfortunately laborious to read. Now I'm going to pick The First 15 Lives of Harry August for this one, because I absolutely hated that book. Now I know some people have enjoyed it. I found the whole experience tedious. I put it down twice before I finished it, and I was just willing the moment when that book would end, that I didn't find any redeeming qualities in it. Some bits were farcical in it, some were pretty far-fetched. Obviously it gets extremely repetitive because we go through Harry August's first 15 lives. I just didn't find it original or gripping. It just really was not for me. And then number 5, the best book featuring a fortunate friendship. Now I'm going to have to pick the classic fortunate friendship, and that is the Sherlock Holmes friendship between Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. I think they both have great qualities that help their friendship last. So Watson grounds Sherlock, but Sherlock allows Watson to get out of his little medical box and see things from a different perspective. And they are a classic duo, really. I think a lot of people think of Sherlock and they think of the friendship, they don't think of Sherlock as a separate entity. I certainly don't. I just think they're a great little dynamic, little duo. So there's that one. Number 6, a book that unfortunately no one talks about. Now, I'm going to pick for this Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriela Garcia Marquez. The reason I wanted to pick that book is because it isn't an in-your-face book, and it's a lot of people will probably read it and not experience what I did, but I really enjoyed that book because I love a book that's not plot driven, that's about the development of two characters, that's often got nostalgic elements, so it's about past friendships or relationships or life experience, and it has all of those things. So a lot of people might find the book pretty dull. Now, I haven't heard many people on BookTube talk about Marquez, and I haven't read any others, so I don't know whether that's just the individual style of the writer, but certainly within this book I really enjoyed the fact that there's not a lot of heavy action, there's a subtlety, and there's a lot of patience between these characters within the plot. And I haven't really heard anyone talk about it, but I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really enjoyed that book a lot more than I ever expected. Number 7, a book that unfortunately transformed and or haunts you. Now obviously I'm going to pick a really obvious answer that a lot of people will probably pick for this one, and that's going to be Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Now that book does haunt you. You get really into the psyche of who is Rebecca and how can Mrs. De Winters compete with her, and what is the relationship between Max and Rebecca before she came along. And then there's all these secrets encapsulated in the house, encapsulated in the characters that live within the house. And it's one of those books that stays with you long after. Number 8, an unfortunately overhyped book. Now I'm going to pick basically a writer, but I haven't read her first collection, but I believe her second collection is very similar. I'm going to pick Rupi Kaur's The Sun and Her Flowers. Now I know that Milk and Honey was highly regarded, and it still is, and a lot of Twitter feeds, it often trends. People use in Instagram posts and Twitter posts lines from this poetry, and after reading The Sun and Her Flowers I really wasn't impressed with her as a poet. And I am somebody who's not an expert at poetry, but I really do enjoy reading it or hearing people recite it. I love how poetry can be used to evoke sensations, but also how people say it, how it's written on the page, how it should be said, where's the pauses, and how that can really affect how you read it. And I think her work was just overly simplistic. I didn't get that challenge that most poetry really gives me. And number 9, a book taking place in the unfortunate future. Now I picked Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And now that is set in a futuristic world in which women don't give birth to babies naturally. They are in man-made embryos and genetic engineering, and there's this kind of metropolis skyscraper world, and people are meant to indulge in pleasures and to not have access to anything intellectually stimulating because they believe that a simple life is a happy life. I think that is very futuristic, and I think now even more prominent than when he wrote it in the 30s. A lot of these themes aren't so startlingly futuristic to us anymore. They are slowly creeping into our everyday awareness, and that's slightly terrifying. And then number 10, book that gets unfortunately plot heavy towards the end. Now I've mentioned this before. I'm going to pick The Life of Pi by Yann Martel. I really enjoyed the beginning bit, and then we get sucked into this shipwreck. Yann Martel had this idea and thought it was amazing and kind of plugs it very, very hard in the book, and by the time you finish you kind of go, so what? I just wasn't impressed with that plot device. I didn't find it overall successful, and I'm not a fan of shipwreck storylines. Number 11, a book with unfortunate themes of mental health. Now I'm going to pick for this Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. And the reason I'm going to pick this one is because I know a lot of people will talk about Wonder as an example with facial disfigurement, or some people might talk about anxiety, depression and pick YA books or contemporary books, but I wanted to pick Lolita because I consider, quite controversially some might see, but I consider that the main protagonist, who has these disturbing thoughts about Lolita and has these disturbing desires for young women, as somebody who suffers a mental health condition, I know some people say that these kind of people are scum of the earth and we shouldn't start labelling them as mentally ill and don't excuse their behaviour, and there's no way that I am excusing their behaviour, but I do believe that for someone to have those drives, like for example serial killers and psychopaths, psychopathy has been kind of registered as a mental illness like schizophrenia, which can result in partaking in criminal activity. I believe that these desires and where it stems from is mental illness that has resulted in the kind of practicing of these behaviours that to us is just so heinous and wrong. So it's a book for the brave is how I would describe it, but it definitely has big themes of mental illness in the book. Number 12, A Book with an Unfortunate Family. I really struggled with this question in particular, and I probably, when I've uploaded this, I'll think of 101 examples. But the best one I could think of was Jane Eyre, because at the beginning we realise that her family are awful. Her cousins, is it her cousins or her brothers and sisters? I think it might be a cousin who's always bullying her, and the mum's always having a go. Stepmum maybe. It's all a bit vague because I haven't read it in years, but I remember really explicitly a scene where a cousin or a brother goads her and causes problems, and the mum locks her in a dark room for it, and then they have kind of religious figure man that comes to the house and he ends up taking her to the boarding school. So she really doesn't have a great home life, and you really don't feel any sympathy for the characters that she lives with. And the story really starts when she leaves home and joins the boarding school, and her passage of discovery begins. But I just always remember that I always thought her family were awful, so it's the best example I can think of off the top of my head. And then the last question, question number 13, a book you unfortunately wish you could fortunately read for the first time again. Now I'm going to pick for this The Virgin Suicides. I read this a few months ago and I was really excited to read it, and I was really worried that when I did read it, it would not live up to the hype, but this is one book that certainly lived up to the hype and then some. It was a fantastic reading experience for me, and I think it's a fantastic book. But I've talked about it enough on this channel anyway, so I won't bore you with that. So that's everything for a series of unfortunate events book tag. Please hit the subscribe button if you want to be alerted for when my future videos come out. I'm not going to specifically tag individual people in this tag because I have no idea who's done the tag, but I will just say now that anybody who wants to be tagged can be tagged. You know, I tag you, so go ahead and do it. I'll be back shortly with more videos of a couple more tags that I need to catch up on and a few bits and bobs. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!